American Maritime Voices was created to help you speak up, show your pride, and when needed, push back. The future of maritime is in your hands, and its story needs to be told. Will you help tell it?
Welcome back to the American Maritime Podcast. We're glad to have you aboard. I'm your host, Jennifer Carpenter, and today we are honored to welcome Mr. Sam Norton, Chief Executive Officer of Overseas Shipholding Group, or OSG, one of America's leading U.S. flag tanker operators. OSG is now part of the Saltchuk family of companies, and it plays a vital role in moving energy cargoes safely and reliably between U.S. ports under the Jones Act. Sam brings decades of global maritime experience to this mission. He has led companies across the commercial shipping sector before he took the helm at OSG, where today he oversees a fleet that is central to America's domestic energy security and maritime strength. Sam, every time I talk to you, I learn so much, so thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, and great to see you again.
You too. I'm sorry, it's so cold. Tell us a little bit, for folks who haven't had the pleasure of getting to know you, tell us a little bit about your path to the maritime industry and to your role at OSG.
So I often say I really have no qualifications for the job that I do. If you go back, my education, I studied Chinese language and literature, and that took me to Asia in the late 70s, early 80s. I had no idea what I was going to do when I went out there, other than it was kind of a new frontier and thought it was a fun place to be. I fell into the finance industry. I worked for my hometown bank, the First National Bank of Boston, for about 8 years, and that took me into shipping through lending activities of the bank. I met a bunch of people that were active in shipping, and eventually they recruited me to come work for an oil tanker company that at that time was based in Hong Kong. And then subsequently moved to Singapore, where I lived for the next 15 years. And then I came back to the United States in 2004, started in 2006, started a regional container shipping company. We did that for about 10 years. And then in 2014, I was asked to join the board of OSG. I was an independent board member for 2 years. And then in 2016, the two halves of what was then Overseas Shipholding Group, one was an international division, one was a domestic division. They were separated into two different distinct companies. And the international division was spun off and became a company called International Seaways. And OSG remained as the publicly listed vehicle centered in or headquartered in Tampa. And I was asked to go and take on the job of Chief Executive Officer at that time, at the end of 2016. It was marketed to me as a short-term job, maybe a year or two, to get the company in a condition that would allow it to be sold. That turned into a 10-year gig. So here I am 10 years later.
So here you are with literally a world of experience. This is why I always learn so much from you. So let's impart some of that world of knowledge to our listeners. Tell us a little bit, something most Americans probably don't understand about the tanker industry and the role that the mariners who make it go play in keeping our country running.
So I think you can kind of divide that up maybe into three distinct parts. The tankers that operate in the Jones Act in the United States are critical for the distribution of product along our coasts. That really takes place in two regional areas. You have on the West Coast, you have refinery centers in Puget Sound, in San Francisco Bay, and in Los Angeles and Long Beach, and you have, of course, many people in between. So you have product that moves up and down the West Coast from those refinery centers to the distribution centers in the three states that are on the West Coast. You also have Alaska. Alaska is a large crude, has been historically, and will probably continue to be a large crude producing region. Virtually all of the oil that's produced in Alaska comes to refineries on the West Coast, and so the Jones Act tankers serve that market. And then the core of the Jones Act tanker trade, energy trade, really is in the U.S. Gulf. You have refining centers in Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. They're large producers of jet fuel, gasoline, and diesel. A lot of that gets moved by pipeline to the East Coast consuming centers, or up by pipeline into the central part of the United States. But Florida is not connected to these refining centers by pipeline, so virtually everything that goes into Florida goes by sea. And I like to say to people, Florida is a country. It's nearly 23 million people. It consumes about 750,000 barrels of refined petroleum product every day. So that's a big business of moving product from Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi into Florida, and the large percentage of that goes on Jones Act ships. So if you live in Florida, as I do, pretty much every time you go fill up your car with gasoline, or every time you get on an airplane to fly to wonderful places like here,
it's just the wrong time of year for that. But anyway,
that fuel will have moved most likely on a Jones Act ship. So that infrastructure distribution capacity is critical to the economy of certainly Florida, certainly the West Coast states, and certainly to Alaska, as it is a backbone of their energy policy. What those vessels do is they provide platforms for jobs. And these are not just normal jobs. These are skilled jobs that require a lot of time, a lot of expertise to be able to acquire the necessary skill sets to be able to navigate, to do cargo operations in particular, and the engineering skills to be able to run the plants that are necessary to move the ships and get the cargo off the ships. So I like to say that of all the resources that we have, the strategic resources, the assets that we have specifically, and the human resources, the most critical resource for our country is the human resources. Because if you allow that skill set to disappear, it's not coming back, right? And I think we've seen industries where the industries have been allowed to atrophy, and the specialized skill sets that are necessary for people to practice the skills in those industries, there's remorse when those skill sets are gone. So having the platforms to be able to provide the careers and to sustain the skill sets that are necessary for a maritime industry, the Jones Act plays a critical role in providing those platforms. And then the third piece is strategic international defense perspective. Those jobs also help provide a pool of mariners for national defense, but then we have programs in U.S. maritime that have U.S. flagships that trade internationally. So you have the Maritime Security Program, which is populated with ro-ros and car carriers, container ships, heavy lift vessels. These are all militarily useful assets that are parts of supply chain logistics for moving anything that you might need in a military conflict. They operate in the commercial trades during times of peace, but they are so on the shelf, so to speak. So if you need those, and then there's a analogous program called the Tanker Security Program, which today has 10 ships. That plays a really important role in supporting logistics and at-sea fuel transfer for naval assets that currently are stationed around the world. So you have the core Jones Act assets that are very important to the economic stability of particularly Florida and the West Coast states. You have the human resource pool that is necessary to keep that skill set that we want to maintain in order to have that capability.
Yep.
And then you have the defense support structure that the maritime security and tanker security ships provide to the defense.
That is an awesome overview and a lot to unpack there. So let's dig into it. I want to start with the Jones Act piece of it. You talked about Florida and the fact that Florida is really, depends on this lifeline of fuel supply provided by Jones Act vessels. What do you say to folks, and we hear them every year, who say it really wouldn't be that big of a deal to allow foreign vessels, foreign companies to move cargo between U.S. domestic points?
I think you got to go back to the comments that I made about the three buckets, or the three pillars of why we need or what maritime expertise brings to our country. If you removed the Jones Act provisions and allowed foreign flag vessels to trade, those jobs would disappear. And if you had historical events that would occur that you would want to go back and find those skill sets, they wouldn't be there. And then now you're dependent upon sourcing those skill sets from a foreign country. And who knows where alliances and allegiances would fall out. And I think that is strategically too great a gamble to take. And we should be understanding that the same way that we invest in preparedness for, and I use the example all the time of a fire station. We have in my community, we have a professional fire department. And those professional firemen are well paid, as they should be. They're skilled first responders. They go through lots of training. They live and work in communities that we all live and work in. So they have schooling expenses, healthcare expenses, all those sorts of things. But it's very comforting for me, certainly, to know that if there's ever a fire in my house, that professionals are going to come and be able to handle that. And I'm not going to need to rely on my neighbors coming with garden hoses to help put my fire out.
Yeah.
So everyone, maybe not everyone, but most people accept the fact that in Miami, which is where I live, we pay a tax. That tax is a fee, in essence, to be able to support the fire department and the first responders, the police department, all those things that we need. If you take that analogy and think of, well, we want to sustain that kind of skill, those kind of skill sets and that pool of professionals, we need to be able to understand how to bear that cost. And what the Jones Act does is it spreads that cost across a large number of people. It socializes that cost in a way that really the visible cost to the consumer is very, very low, if invisible. I think there's been studies that the cost per gallon of gasoline that is derived from Jones Act transportation costs is less than 1 cent per gallon.
A lot less than your credit card fee to swipe at the pump.
Or think of taxes on gasoline in the state of Florida are like 16%, right? So that's on a $2-3, that's whatever. 48 cents is taxes. And so you're talking about another cent or two that would be related to the transportation cost, and that cost is going to support much more than just the profits of the oil companies. So I think it's the skill set that's critical. It's having assured access to the assets that you need in case there's ever an effort to isolate the United States in one form or another. You have those assets to be able to move critical energy resources along the coast, and those are important. Those are important factors to consider when thinking about how to socialize those costs and make sure that those resources are there.
Absolutely. And to use your fire department analogy, we want those resources to be right here. When the fire is occurring, you don't want to have to, Google the nearest fire department that might have assets available that aren't occupied somewhere else. We need our homegrown.
I think that's a good point.
Our homegrown folks.
Welcome to American Maritime Voices, your place to be heard. As part of American Maritime, you are critical to moving and securing our country. And now you can help tell the story of maritime and be part of key decisions that affect it. American Maritime Voices was created to help you speak up, show your pride, and when needed, push back. It's free to become a voice, and we'll keep you informed of what's happening in Washington, so you can help change the course of issues that matter most to you. As a voice, you'll get monthly updates, have access to podcasts and videos, and receive action alerts when your voice is needed most. The future of maritime is in your hands, and its story needs to be told. Will you help tell it?
Okay, so you've convinced me, you've convinced our listeners that by and large we should rely on domestic operators to move cargo between U.S. ports. But we always hear at this time of year when it's cold, when it's very cold in New England where you're from, just this once, it's really cold. Shouldn't we be able to get Jones Act waivers to, say, move gas from the Gulf Coast to New England. I've heard you do a masterful job of just explaining how that market works and why Jones Act waivers are not a solution. Can you give us the non-PhD version there?
So energy choices that have been made in New England over the last several decades have been have created conditions where there can be shortages or perceived shortages of gas, that's natural gas, in New England in the winter months, particularly when it gets cold. And that's because unlike other parts of the country, New England relies heavily on natural gas for heating. And so when cold weather comes into the region, there are only a limited amount of pipelines that bring gas into the region, and the power generating facilities are also consumers of gas. And there's a competition between homeowners who want to turn up the heat in their house and power generating facilities, which also need more gas because some people have electric heat, and it's usually the winter, so it's dark all the time, so you need more power generating capacity. So that creates a competition. The buffer zone that was established decades ago was to build storage capacity in Boston to be able to bring liquefied natural gas in during the summer months and build up that storage and rely on maybe spot cargoes during the winter months to supplement the principal gas delivery system, which comes by pipeline. The problem with blaming the Jones Act for shortages in the wintertime when there's cold weather, it's twofold. One is the storage capacity really doesn't exist, particularly now you have the Everett terminal in Boston, which the principal power generating facility that relied upon those storage facilities has been shut down. So the company that actually owns the Everett facility has been trying to shut that facility down because it's not utilized very much. Only a month or two in the winter, it's not necessarily economically viable to keep that storage facility in operation. The Massachusetts state and other New England states have advocated for keeping that open because it is important as a buffer storage area. So, but you can only bring so much gas in during the summer and only so much on spot markets to be able to discharge that. The infrastructure is not there to allow that to happen. But most importantly, I think, is that people say, well, if we didn't have a Jones Act, we could take foreign flag LNG tankers and we could load in the Mississippi River with all these new LNG export facilities that are coming up, and we could bring that domestic gas up to New England and it would be much cheaper. And that's just not correct, because if you look at this principal source of supply of LNG into New England today, it's Trinidad and Tobago. And if look at the distance from Trinidad and Tobago to Boston versus the distance from, let's call it the mouth of the Mississippi River to Boston, it's about the same. So you're not going to see any significant change in cost in the delivered price of that gas, and the contractual arrangements with Trinidad to be able to take those spot voyages into New England already serve that market very well. So I'm a bit of a skeptic that just waiving the Jones Act would be an effective way to try and relieve some of the pressures that arise during periods of cold weather like we're seeing this winter. It's more of a political hot point to be able to try and pick that particular trade and say this is a good reason why we shouldn't have the Jones Act. I think when you unpack everything that's there, and I think the current administration sees that as well. What really needs to happen in New England is they need to expand their pipeline capacity. Yeah. And that's a political choice. And then for those that might want to do that, there's also a big push, or has been a big push in New England in recent years to try and de-emphasize fossil fuel as a primary fuel and have wind and solar and hydro to replace fossil fuel generating facilities. And so that makes it very difficult for investors in power generating to take and make the long-term planning and long-term capital investments to be able to increase the power generating capacity. So all of that creates a lot of uncertainty, and I would argue even in the shipping world, if there was a Jones Act LNG vessel, it would be a really hard business case to make because you really only need that shipping capacity 2-3 months of the year. And if you have a declining demand for gas, which has been signaled by the New England politicians, if you build a ship, it's got a ship for 20, 30 years. If there's no demand for gas in 10 years, then you're going to be left with a stranded asset. So I think that for New Englanders, the right choice is either continue to develop the alternative resources to be able to provide reliable power as an alternative to fossil fuel generation, or advocate for an expansion of pipelines to bring the Marcellus Shale, which is in Pennsylvania and New York. It's pretty close, actually. Bring that into New England and then build some additional buffer storage to give you that relief in case you have really cold winter.
Makes sense. Or both. And I saw folks making these arguments last week. Oh, don't we need a Jones Act waiver? So next time I hear that, we've got the answer. Since you mentioned alternative sources of energy, I think it's really interesting to kind of think about the role of the domestic Jones Act fleet potentially as a transporter of alternative sources of energy. And your company has made some really cool investments, as I understand it, in carbon capture ATBs. Can you just talk a little bit about that and about new markets for Jones Act operations?
So thank you for that question. I like to talk about opportunities in the Jones Act not being limited to just fossil fuel transportation, but any liquid bulk cargo commodities that could or would be necessary to move along the coast. And one of those opportunities that we've identified is the possibility of moving liquefied CO2. There's a nascent industry. You can go to Europe. There are a couple of projects in Europe which are already involved in the transport of liquefied CO2. We think, and I think that we're not alone. We think that industry is going to arise here in the United States and become a very large industry. The CEO of Exxon has publicly stated that he thinks the carbon capture and sequestration business in the United States by 2050 is a $6 trillion business.
Wow.
So that sounds like an opportunity for us. And sometimes it's good to be smart. Sometimes it's good to be lucky. It's always good to be both. So Florida, we're lucky to be in Florida because Florida presents a relatively unique set of problems. Most of the power generation stations in Florida burn natural gas. This is pipeline delivered gas. Natural gas, of course, is a fossil fuel. So when you burn natural gas, it has CO2 emissions. And so if you want to reduce those CO2 emissions, technology exists today to be able to capture the carbon in the exhaust stream of the plants. And once you capture the carbon, that's great. What do you do with it? So in some parts of the country, the geology is such that you can basically drill a hole in your backyard and put the captured CO2 into geological formations in nearby. And so the transportation challenge there is relatively small. For Florida's a reef. So geologically speaking, so if you drill down into the reef, it's a very porous structure. So you're not going to be able to keep the CO2 that you capture in any real form for very long if you put it underground in Florida. So if one believes that carbon capture is going to be part of future power plant kits, that whether in response to public pressure to be more mindful of the impact of carbon emissions, whether it's because of regulation or whether it's because many companies have a global footprint and they may need to be able to satisfy the community demands of Europe or Asia or other places in order to be able to do business in those jurisdictions. If you believe that carbon capture will become a thing, then it's a transportation problem. And we see that transportation solution as being establishing a hub in Tampa. Within 45 miles of Tampa, there are power generating facilities that generate about 25 million tons a year of CO2. 25 million tons is a lot. Globally, it's like 50 gigatons, 50 million gigatons. So it's, in global terms, it's not a lot, but in real terms, 25 million tons is a lot. The project that we've received some grant money from the Department of Energy to develop starts at 2 million tons a year. So we're talking about 10% of the identified demand just within a 45-mile radius of Tampa to liquefy the carbon emissions that are captured at the power plants at a facility in Tampa, put that liquefied CO2 on specially designed ATBs that will then carry the liquefied CO2 to discharge points in the U.S. Gulf, whether in Louisiana or Texas. And there are pipeline facilities that are dedicated to CO2 that can be fed and take that CO2 either for use in what's called enhanced oil recovery, which is helping to sustain energy dominance in the United States, or into effectively salt caverns and geological formations that can receive the liquefied CO2 under pressure and be stored for thousands of years.
That is fascinating. That is really cool. Okay, so very interesting stuff in terms of opportunities to potentially grow the domestic fleet, the Jones Act fleet. Let's talk a little bit about the U.S. flag international fleet. So we've heard President Trump and his administration talk about restoring America's maritime dominance. We've seen bipartisan leaders in Congress say we need to do something to compete with China to ensure that we've got the ability to support the projection of U.S. power, U.S. interests internationally. What do you see as the most effective ways to really grow the U.S. flag international fleet?
The intermediate solutions for allowing for growth of the U.S. flag fleet trading internationally. As I mentioned earlier, we have the Tanker Security Program. The Tanker Security Program currently has 10 vessels enrolled in it. Congress has authorized an increase in that program to 20 ships. What's really needed in order to stimulate that growth is more cargo. And we have been advocating here in Washington, the pet name for the project is the Barrel Run. I didn't come up with that name, but somebody else did. But we're advocating for the Defense Logistics Agency to commit to a certain percentage of cargo that is for jet fuel, diesel, gasoline that is used by the Department of Defense or the defense agencies around the world. A certain percentage of that should be sourced from the United States, and sourced from the United States and put on U.S. flag vessels. That would increase the demand and increase the incidence of cargo preference. That would allow an expansion of that tanker security fleet on an economically viable basis. I personally believe that it's not a heavy lift for Transcom and for the Department of Logistics, the Defense Logistics Agency, to be able to take that into consideration. I like to use the analogy as you play like you practice. So, establishing a supply chain that runs from the U.S. Gulf to the Pacific on a regular basis allows you to practice like you're going to play. And it has a secondary benefit, in my opinion, because it signals to our potential adversaries that we're making the necessary investment in preparedness and readiness. And because ships have AIS, they have transponders, everybody can track ships wherever we're going. Anyone that's paying attention is going to notice that this supply chain is being grooved.
Yep.
And I think that sends a really important signal that we're willing to make the investment to be able to ensure that supply chain is well established and well practiced. And If we do that, we create more ton-mile demand, we create more cargoes, and you can increase the number of platforms that are doing that. That's a different way of saying you increase the number of U.S. flag vessels that are operating. And now you can use that as the means to build out your mariner pool and create that skill set, expand that skill set, which is ultimately the most critical part of supporting that logistics chain.
That's excellent. So we potentially have a doubling of the tanker security program to increase these platforms. We were talking a little bit before the podcast began about some other potential cargo preference opportunities to use cargo to drive the growth of U.S. flag vessels trading internationally. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the other topical possibilities there?
Sure. So the current hot topic right now is Venezuela. There is discussions about directing an increase of Venezuelan crude oil production to domestic refineries and using that crude oil as a lever to increase U.S. energy dominance. And if that were to be the case, then many believe there would be an opportunity to say a portion, if not all of that crude oil that's being produced in Venezuela that's directed to U.S. refineries could be moved on U.S. flag vessels. If that opportunity were to arise, OSG and the others in this country that are active in the tanker trade, there's a very liquid and deep market internationally of tankers. So one could go out and acquire suitable size and suitable design vessels to be able to engage in that trade. And again, those platforms would then allow for expansion of mariners that would be working, and that would have a positive strategic impact in my view. The other opportunity that has been put forward is the West Coast today, California in particular, is seeing a decline in the refining capacity in those states. There are two refineries. One was closed at the end of last year. One is scheduled to be closed in April of this year. And the West Coast is already in deficit from a product mix point of view. So that means there's going to be a significant increase in imports of gasoline, diesel, jet fuel. Most likely that's going to come from Japan and Korea. So putting that development in the context of commitments that the Japanese and Koreans have made to make investments into the United States in the context of the trade agreements that were reached with the current administration, there is some talk to say, well, what does it mean to have an investment? It's buying product from the United States. It's investing in physical plant in the United States. Maybe it's supporting U.S. flag operations, that you can take credit for paying the additional costs that would be needed to transport on a U.S. flag vessel some of that product that's coming out of Korea or Japan into the West Coast of the United States. That could create an opportunity for increased preference cargo, increased cargo to move on U.S. flag vessels. And then the third area that we talked about, which I think is interesting, is the liquefied natural gas industry in this country is rapidly on a trajectory to become the leading provider of LNG in the world, exporting considerable quantities of LNG. If you go back to 2016, the amount of exports of LNG in this country was virtually zero. By the end of this decade, the U.S. will be the largest exporter of LNG by far. And from the literature that I've read, if you look at the planned liquefied natural gas export facilities that are intended to come on stream between now and the end of the decade, the volume of LNG that will be exported will drive demand for an incremental 80 to 100 ships. These are large LNG tankers. Wow. And I think there's opportunity to try and, again, look at a portion of those exports and say, okay, a portion of those exports could go on U.S. flag vessels and provide the economic foundation for those vessels to be able to operate. And I think there's an equation that could be developed to say that the cost of that would be borne not by the exporter, but by the importer. Again, think about Europe, where They have energy security issues going back to their overdependence upon Russian gas. The shift to being able to have U.S. gas be a large part of the mix of their energy supply. I think there could be an argument built in that the commitments that the European countries have made in the context of the trade agreements, let's put some of that money into deferring the incremental cost of U.S. flag operations. And if you were to look at the economics of that, the actual incremental cost on a dollar per MMBTU, it's relatively minor. And I think there's some leverage that could be used there to be able to take advantage of the energy dominance that is being developed here in the United States, in conjunction with the trade partners that are looking for ways to try and satisfy a more establish more of an equilibrium between trade.
That it's really cool how all of that fits together. So I'm hearing cargo drives the need for vessels. And then we also need the mariners. So you've talked about that several times, really important. Certainly a foundation of having the mariners we need is them knowing that there are platforms for them to work on and they're going to have a job because, the market is there. What else do we need to be doing? And if you want to give a little commercial for some of the stuff that OSG has done to support the development of a U.S. maritime workforce, now will be a great time to brag a little.
So there are several career paths for seafarers to pursue. The one that is generally receives most focus are the licensed officer career paths. There are viable and important other career paths for unlicensed crew, able-bodied seamen, bosuns, support stewards. That we should not forget the importance of those people as well. The SIU does a fantastic job at Piney Point in providing training. And we also work with the SIU to provide effectively internships or cadetships for people to come and acquire the skills that are necessary to have those careers. So that's one piece. But the more challenging piece is really for the licensed officers because, frankly, it's expensive it's super expensive to get to a licensed track. Kings Point is a federal maritime institution. Tuition at Kings Point, like at Annapolis or at West Point, is covered by the federal government. And so if you're fortunate enough to be admitted into Kings Point, then the cost of that education is perhaps less of a concern. There is a commitment to sail and work for the government that comes after that, so it's not free. But the financial resources in order to kickstart that career are made are less onerous than if you were to look at the state institutions. There are 6 state maritime institutions in this country. That's the primary conduit through which young people enter the maritime industry on a license track to be officers, either on the engine side or on the navigation side and the cargo side. If you look at the cost today of completing a 4-year degree at, say, a Mass Maritime Academy or at SUNY Academy or at the Maine Maritime Academy, I don't want to leave anybody else. You have Texas, you have Michigan, you have California, but I'm most familiar with Massachusetts Maritime. The cost of completing that 4-year, essentially college education, is in excess of $200,000. Yes, once you graduate, the jobs that are available are well-paying and can be justified if you were doing a spreadsheet and say, well, I can earn that money back.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, if you go to your parents and say, hey, I have a great idea. I found this academy in Massachusetts where I can go and I can study to be an engineer or study to be a deck officer, and I come out of school and I can start immediately at $125,000 to $130,000 a year. That sounds like a really good opportunity. And so they're sitting around the dinner table, and you say, "Well, that sounds great." He says, "Yeah, but I need $200,000 to be able to, to make that happen."
Yeah.
And then it's like, "Well, that's not going to happen. So go find another idea." So I think industry and government can help in this area by thinking about ways to provide financial support. OSG provides a significant amount of financial support to participants in the state maritime academies to help them get ahead of that financial nut and to make the entry into our industry a little bit less onerous from a financial position. I think more can be done. I think that that a strategic approach from the government. You have Kings Point, yes. Why can't we start to think about ways to tie financial support to service? There are programs that are lightly funded that are available to students at the state maritime academies, but I think those programs could be enhanced, and I think that industry, certainly the colleagues that I talk to, industry is standing by to say, well, we can match some of those fundings. It's an investment in our future.
Absolutely.
That's the way I look at it. The same way we invest in steel and engines and facilities and warehouses, we need to invest in the human resources that are going to be necessary to be able to run our business.
Absolutely. Amen. Critically important for the U.S. economy, for U.S. security, as well as for the bottom line of companies who make their living in this business. So, Sam, we've covered a lot of ground, and this has been fantastic, as always. What have we missed? What have I not probed on that maybe deserves a little bit more attention here before we let you get out of freezing D.C. and go back to Florida?
So the reason I'm actually in town this week is I participated in a forum that's looking at applications of nuclear power to the commercial marine industry. And to put that in context, internationally, the International Maritime Organization has mandated certain regulations to make it more and more expensive or more difficult to continue the use of conventional fossil fuels as the primary fuel for running ships. If you connect the dots and trace the line, sometime in the next 20 years, it'll become too expensive to run ships with fossil fuels, or they'll go so slowly that it'll be expensive anyway because the ships will barely move. So there's a lot of talk about alternative fuels that could replace fossil fuels, and depending on who you talk to, there will be champions for, let's say, ammonia, champions for LNG, champions for hydrogen, champions for methanol. All of those fuels present certain problems, and some of those problems maybe are surmountable, some of them maybe not. I believe that if you're looking for the long-term solution for a low-carbon propulsive capacity that would allow ships to sail actually at much faster speeds with no carbon impact at all, nuclear is a really, really interesting option. And the United States is leading in this area. We've actually had a nuclear-powered naval fleet for decades.
Yeah.
And there was actually a nuclear-powered commercial ship called the Savannah that was built in the 60s that sailed around the globe in this sort of Atoms for Peace program to demonstrate the technology was developed and capable of being used. Fast forward to the 21st century, today nuclear is having a renaissance. If you look at the stock market companies that are involved in nuclear, you've got TerraPower, you've got others like that are developing what are called small modular reactors, SMRs, that can be scaled down to very small levels and utilize technology that has considerably larger fail-safe capabilities in terms of protecting people that are working in that environment and protecting people that would be exposed to a potential nuclear accident in the event that a ship was in a port. All these ideas, all these approaches are rapidly evolving to an interesting level that make small modular reactors inside of commercial ships a real possibility. And it's complicated. There's a lot of things that have to be managed. You've got regulatory regimes that date back to the 50s and 60s that need to be updated. You've got technology. You've got different types of technology that are being developed, and all of them are still in sort of prototype stages that need to be proven. You've got workforce requirements. If we already talked about the fact that we don't have enough mariners. Now we have to train up mariners to be able to operate in a nuclear powered environment. Not only the people that are in the engine room, but everybody is working in a nuclear facility. There's a higher standard of safety and a higher standard of knowledge of what needs to be done. That investment needs to be made in advance of any nuclear vessel that would be brought on stream. Nonetheless, I think it's super exciting, and it's something I'm starting to spend a lot more time on, working to pull all those strands of complication together into a nice, strong rope of opportunity.
Oh, that is fantastic. Okay, I definitely, I feel a future podcast coming on. We'll give you a little while to work out some of the, some of the strands there, but really fascinating to look at the opportunities, whether we're talking carbon capture, whether we're talking nuclear, to really take America's maritime industry into the next decade and do something. We've heard a lot, over the last year and a half about this kind of maritime moment. We've got attention from the administration. We've got attention from Congress to the criticality of this industry. And, I think our collective challenge is making sure that this maritime moment really becomes a maritime era and not a passing thing. So super excited about the work you're doing. That's all for this episode of the American Maritime Podcast. We hope that our audience will share this show and also go to AmericanMaritimeVoices.org and sign up to be a voice on maritime issues. We need you. Again, that's AmericanMaritimeVoices.org. Check it out. Sam, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm Jennifer Carpenter, signing off.